Hi, I'm Dr. Shannon Whiteside, Program Director for the Alveary, and I'm here today with a few of our curriculum developers, Catherine Avery, Danielle Merritt-Sinceri, and Dr. Meredith Donaldson-Clark. This is the 10th year of the Alveary, and we are so excited to give you a preview of some of the books we will be reading for the 25-26 school year. If you want to learn more about Alveary, you can browse our viewbook, which is linked in the video description below. The viewbook also contains a free term of art lessons for you to try out. I want to reiterate that we are just highlighting some of the books that are part of our curriculum. There are many more. I also want to remind you that although the books are an important part of the lesson, there is more to a lesson plan than reading and narrating books. Mason talks about the 4 components of a lesson. Each lesson should begin with a recap of the previous lesson, then some kind of introduction to whet the appetite of the students or to give them some more context for what they are about to read. Then the reading and narrating, followed by a short discussion. Our lesson plans provide those components to help you set up the lesson, look at a map, or ask a question to get students thinking about the topic. We also provide optional discussion questions and links to learn more. We encourage you to visit alveary.org and view samples of our lesson plans. Our lesson plans reduce your planning time while helping you grow in practicing Charlotte Mason's methods.
You might also find it helpful to take a minute and watch our videos on how we choose books. We cover the questions we ask ourselves when we're deciding on books each year, and that gives you the background to understand our goals and the information you need to tailor the curriculum to your students. So we suggest that you click over to see those videos now, and we'll see you back here soon.
Let's begin with Bible. Charlotte Mason said that of the 3 sorts of knowledge proper to a child, the knowledge of God, of man, and of the universe, the knowledge of God ranks first in importance, is indispensable, and most happy-making. She didn't want Bible lessons to be moralistic and children to feel like the Bible is a list of do's and don'ts, but she wanted each Bible lesson to give new thoughts of God, new hopes of heaven. When students are young, we want them to come to know God through his stories. Therefore, grades 1 through 6 read selections of the Old Testament narratives and the Gospels. Then from 7th grade through high school, students read through the whole Bible chronologically with the aid of Bible resources and commentaries as appropriate.
Students in 4th through 6th grade are doing the same lessons as 3rd graders and will be studying the books of Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They will read through the book of Exodus and selections from Numbers and Deuteronomy with the guidance of 2 volumes from the series Herein is Love by Nancy Gantz. Nancy's purpose in these books falls nicely in line with Mason's purpose of not using the Bible as a rule book, but as the message of who God is and why we can trust him. We have teachers read specific selections aloud to students to highlight points in the passage and help them see the bigger picture of God's redemptive story. For New Testament, we are studying the book of Luke and using this book, The New Manners and Customs of Bible Times. Through illustrations, photos, and clear explanations, the author shows us what life was like in Bible times so Scripture can come more alive as students imagine living in that time and place. We will assign certain sections before or after Bible readings that will help students understand the context of the passage and get more insight into the culture and geography of Israel. Our Bible lessons will also include readings about men and women from church history, from the historical time period we are studying. For 2025 to 26, we are studying the time period of 1650 to 1800 AD. 4th through 6th graders will be reading 2 different biographies. One of these biographies is about someone who might not be as familiar to most people, but he was a pioneer of Christian missions. Students will read Count Zinzendorf by Janet and George Benge. As a count, he was educated at the best schools of Europe, yet his heart was never far from the gospel, and he felt a call to serve God in a radical way. He traveled as far as Africa, America, and Russia to share the gospel, encourage many others to pursue a life of missions.
That's a great example of how, as we turn to history now, history is really so much more than just the books scheduled in history. The historical period we're studying for this next year is 1650 to 1800 AD, and then grades 5 and up also add a stream of ancient history, which is 550 to 100 BC. And the same period is studied for world history as well. So while the history books are vital in bringing the time period to life, as Mason said, history is the pivot of the curriculum, but multiple subjects really build that out. So from the church history books, Shannon was just talking about, to pictures they're studying in picture study from John Singleton Copley and others, to hymns they're learning by people like John Newton and William Cooper, to folk songs like Yankee Doodle or a French voyager's paddling song, and even a simple Japanese folk song about cherry blossoms that just became internationally famous. Handicrafts and leatherwork and literature readings and geography, all of these really enrich students' imaginations and grow their relationship with the time. And before we go to the actual books, we also wanted to mention and just recommend a book for you as parents and teachers. It's called A Little Book for New Historians by Dr. Tracy McKenzie, Robert Tracy McKenzie. And this book and Dr. McKenzie's work have just been really helpful to us in thinking about history and how to help students encounter different times with humility and love, as Mason encouraged. And high school students read this book in the curriculum. So by reading this book for yourself now, you're also getting double duty work in, because you will have finished pre-reading it for your high school students as well. So that's just a little plug for that book.
Let's talk about U.S. history. Students will continue reading the book America, Our Stories by Laureen Lambert. This is a book that does a good job of telling the story of the U.S. She provides the right amount of information to keep the narrative going, but still provides ideas and details to capture students' imagination. We also think it is important to dig deeper into the lives of people so students can get a better perspective of how life was and the challenges that people faced. Therefore, we'll read a couple books that capture the daily life of people at that time. A Young Patriot, The American Revolution is Experienced by One Boy, by Jim Murphy, is a great book that uses primary sources, has detailed illustrations and maps to present the life of Joseph Plum Martin. He was a 15-year-old Connecticut boy who enlisted in the Continental Army. This book offers students a firsthand experience to see what daily life was like for the soldiers that fought for our country. Students will also read A Free Woman on God's Earth, which is the story of Elizabeth Freeman, who was born a slave in Massachusetts, but through an understanding of the law and help from lawyers, she was able to earn her freedom and help others earn their freedom as well. In world history, we want students to get a feel of what was happening in other places and be immersed in that time and place. One of the ways to do that is through historical novels. One of the novels students will read is based on a true story from the late 17th century. Thrown to the Wind by Amanda Citrus tells the story of a young boy named Etienne who lives in France during the reign of King Louis XIV. This was the time when the Huguenots, the French Protestants, could not worship freely or even have a profession. Etienne's family escapes at night on a boat that first sails to Amsterdam and then finally sails to New Amsterdam in North America. So this is a great book written by an author who does a great job at capturing students' imagination.
We also have a curriculum for Canadian students to learn about history. Fourth grade Canadian students will read the same books as the second and third graders, and these include the Kids' Book of Canadian History, Took and the Whale, which is a story of an Inuit boy whose community on Baffin Island comes into contact with a ship of European whalers, and also The Red Sash, which is about a rendezvous of voyagers at Fort William. Students in grade 5 and 6 will learn about Canada's pre-Confederation history by continuing to read Janet Lunn and Christopher Moore's The Story of Canada. The narrative picks up with the establishment of New France and continues to the eve of the War of 1812. One other book we will read this year to learn more about Indigenous history during the 17th century is William Dumas's book, Amo's Sapotawan, a beautifully illustrated story of a Rocky Cree girl, Amo, and her Sapotawan, which means a rite of passage, as she chooses the path for her life. It is a story that is richly historical, using Amo's story to teach us about Indigenous traditions, but it is also a universal story, as it's a story about a young teenager who, supported by her community, works to discover where her skills and her gifts lie. Later in the year, we will learn more about the wider French and English conflicts that played out in North America during the 7 Years' War through Betsy Maestro's struggle for a continent, and we will read some historical fiction to learn more about Canada's early days.
In ancient history, 5th and 6th grade students will study some of the civilizations from around 550 to 100 BC. We will be exploring the ancient Greek civilization through Lion in the Gateway by Mary Renault. This is a retelling of the Greek and Persian wars by a master storyteller who captures the spirit and values of the ancient Greek people. She interweaves other aspects of their history and culture as she tells about the wars. Another book that students will read is Victory on the Walls, a story of Nehemiah. This historical novel, told through the eyes of Nehemiah's nephew, tells about the turning point in Jewish history when King Artaxerxes allows Nehemiah, his cupbearer, to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls. It is fascinating to see how events in the Bible took place at the same time as these other world events. Often students can think that Bible history happened in a vacuum, but this book will help them understand what was happening in those ancient Near Eastern countries and how that affected God's people.
Let's look at geography. Across the grades in geography, there are various strands that we want to cover. We want students to learn about physical geography, historical geography, regional geography, and cartography, or the study of maps. Our geography for 4th through 8th is also based on the historical time period. 4th through 6th will be reading the same books for world geography. They'll be exploring South America through the book The Incredible Yet True Adventures of von Humboldt. Through the journeys of von Humboldt, from his home in Germany to his scientific explorations in South America, Mexico, and Cuba, students learn about the animals, plants, and cultures of these places. This is a newer book that is beautifully illustrated with sketches, drawings, and maps to capture the time and place. In geography, we also use the book Great Rivers of the World, which is written by the same author. This book is used over the grades, and each year we look at a couple of the rivers as it pertains to our readings.
Let's talk about English. We are continuing on with Michael Clay Thompson books for grammar and composition. We really like the way he talks about the ideas of language and the importance of knowing the parts of speech, not just to know them or memorize a list of rules, but because it allows us to communicate well. He does a good job tying it all together. This subject should be done together with your student so you can discuss the ideas and have them articulate what the author is saying. And as students start writing more narrations, they gradually build their confidence and fluency with words. We also provide copywork and dictation books with passages that come from this year's books to make this subject easy for you to implement. 4th grade begins with Grammar Island and Practice Island. 5th grade works on composition as well with the book Sentence Island, while still finishing up Practice Island. 6th grade uses Grammar Town and Practice Town.
Let's talk about literature. Starting in Form 2, our grade 4, Charlotte Mason connected literature much more closely with history, so more historical fiction is included in the program. Students also start to read more of their books independently, and as they grow in their ability to read and narrate, they explore other times and develop their imagination and their sense of right and wrong, good and evil, and the complexity and beauty of life through the characters in their books. Grade 4 and up begin reading and listening to Shakespeare, and we'll be studying Macbeth, Much Ado About Nothing, and Henry IV, Part 1. Grade 4 students and those who are new to Shakespeare also have the option to start with our beginner level and read A Midsummer Night's Dream first instead.
And then building on the mythology and tales in the earlier grades, grade 4 is reading Norse mythology with the book In the Days of Giants. And grades 5 and 6 is reading Greek mythology from Thomas Bulfinch's large work, but then also reading Rosemary Sutcliffe's retelling of the Iliad, Black Ships Before Troy, which not only continues that understanding of Greek mythology, but also sort of ties into our time period from this year. And so that get the story of the Iliad and the epic fall of Troy. And then students are also reading from poets such as William Blake and Phyllis Wheatley. And they're also enjoying historical fiction classics like the favorite Johnny Tremain, which is set in Boston just before the American Revolution. And then grade 4 students have the option to choose between 2 books, The Arrow Over the Door and Seesaw Girl. The Arrow Over the Door takes students into the complex days of the 1700s when Native Americans, French, British, American colonists are all in the same space with different alliances and different goals. And then Seesaw Girl is set in the 17th century in Korea. And it's just a beautiful story about a girl who's just trying to understand her place in the world. And just a sort of fun aside, I did not know to be thankful for our current laundry system because apparently it was normal back then to take all the stitches out of your clothes and wash them and then re-sew them all. So I am now much more thankful for the ease and convenience of not having to unsew all my clothes and then re-sew them every time I wash them. Anyway, meanwhile, grades 5 and 6 are reading classics like Treasure Island and a fascinating found version of the life of Olaudah Equiano called Nero My Freedom. And they took the actual work by Equiano himself and turned his actual words using the descriptions and verbs and nouns and in the text. So keeping his same text, but they sort of redacted some of it and turned it into poetry. It makes it a lot more accessible for the younger grades. And there's also interesting historical side notes here and there, which just give context for some of the discussions about Equiano's work and just the overall historical context going on as well. So that is just a fascinating one that our 5th and 6th graders will be enjoying, as well as 7th and 8th actually as well.
In Citizenship, students in 4th grade read stories from the history of Rome that will give them a foundation for Plutarch, which begins in 5th grade. Next year for Plutarch, we will be reading 2 lives. We use the Plutarch Project to read Alexander and Timoleon. Plutarch can seem overwhelming for some people. We provide a beginner's track for Plutarch, and these lessons will cover just 2 terms, reading the life of Publicola. There'll be more guidance in these lessons, and the readings will be shorter for students new to the subject. We don't want you to miss the subject that Mason esteems so highly. She stated in her book, School Education, perhaps nothing outside of the Bible has the educational value of Plutarch's lives.
Let's look next at life skills. Our handicraft next year for grades 2 through 12, we'll be learning how to cross-stitch, and students will have the opportunity to make their own modern version of a colonial sampler. They will also learn how to do leather stitching with the guidance of videos as well as the book Getting Started in Leather Crafting. We follow Mason's model and do clay modeling every year for 1 term. We use the book A Manual of Clay Modeling, and we provide video instructions for many of the models.
In grades 4 through 6, students begin to notice that science is an active part of their world. And so the books that we have for these grades for science feed into that development. So, for example, let me show you this book called Octopus Scientist. This is on the grade 4 program. And in this book, a group of scientists venture out to search for this elusive and beautiful creature. And we follow them in this story. We share in their frustration when they can't find the octopus, as well as their joy and their delight when they finally do. Another beautiful one for this grade, this is a great introduction to things too small to see. This one is called The Universe in You. In this one, we learn about all sorts of things that we can't see with our unaided eyes. And we learn about looking closer. We learn that even using microscopes, there are still going to be things that we can't see, but we know they're there. Some highlights from fifth grade. This one is written by one of my favorite authors. This one is Beetlebusters, and this is the story of a community as they discover that an invasive insect is threatening their beloved forest. This book gives us plenty to think about in terms of trees and insects and ecosystems, but also about the fact that decisions about how we steward and care for creation are often difficult. So there are such great conversations to be had there. We've also got this book for our fifth graders this year. This one is called The Forest and the Tree. I love this book because it introduces us to the importance of soil and fungi in botany, and because we get lots of opportunity to connect those ideas from our microscope experience and our chemistry experience with the botany, and this is overall just really a lovely book. In grade 6, we have books like The Wolves and Moose of Isle Royale. This is a fascinating and complex story about this predator-prey relationship that really defines and manages a whole ecosystem. Grade 6 is such a great time developmentally to encounter some of these more complex ideas, and stories like this let us follow these naturalists and these scientists to consider the circumstances, to let us consider why and how decisions are made, and to give us a glimpse into the methods and challenges of scientific work itself. We've also got Phineas Gage on our list this year for sixth grade. This one is ever popular. In this story, we are following the horrific accident and the tragic follow-up of a railroad worker in Vermont. This is an incredible story. And of course, all of our books in grades 4 through 6 coordinate with our custom lab manuals and field activities so that you have a complete science curriculum.
Thank you for joining us in this preview. You can find samples on our website, alveary.org, along with a free set of lesson plans. You'll find more information about the Alveary in our view book and on our YouTube channels. We are so excited for the adventures that await both teacher and students this next year.